Hello, my name is Dave Hodgson and we very warmly welcome you to the ASP Movement website. Please take time to watch this video as it is designed to give you a full understanding of what it is that ASP is, and for that matter what ASP isn't, so that you can make an educated decision as to whether to join us or not. The fact is, we live in a world which is saturated with social and economic distress, the symptoms of which are getting worse and worse, and at some point in the not too distant future they will become unmanageable, much as they always have throughout history. Such things as poverty and homelessness, unemployment, unsustainable debt, drug and alcohol addiction, substance abuse, such as the ICE epidemic currently sweeping our nation, domestic violence. So many women are being beaten and killed in our families, it's just unbelievable. The suicide levels are high, out of control crime, corruption is high even in this sophisticated country like Australia. We have very high recidivism, that's the repeat offending of prisoners, trafficking in children, sex slavery, yes, sex slavery right here under our noses in Australia. There is hunger and starvation, there is still racism, there is still sexism, and of course on the economic front the unfunded liabilities of our governments. That is of course the making of election promises and post-election promises and commitments which can never be funded, they can never be paid for, just to get votes. This will inevitably lead to immense financial and social distress for our children and our grandchildren. If we go further afield and we look at the first world, obviously the third world, obviously there are wars, there are refugees streaming out of countries, there's persecution, there is feudalism and slavery, sectarianism, and of course corruption and more corruption. Third world is rabid as with corruption. Now, the thing is, ladies and gentlemen, that all of these are symptoms of something. And if they are symptoms, there has to be a root cause for all of the above. And that root cause is actually a cultural issue. Okay, it is the inbred culture of maximizing self-interest at the expense of others, which causes all of this distress. Or if you put it in modern, as you see it in modern financial journals, it is the culture of greed, fear and corruption that dominates or drives our capital markets. So this culture has driven the economies and the societies and the individuals of virtually all nations since time began. In Australia, it's taught from the cradle to the grave. Our junior and secondary education curriculum support this. Our universities and tertiary institutions teach it. The focus being that we should compete with others to get a job. Once we have the job, we must compete with others to get promotion. And the driving force behind the job and the promotion is to maximize our own benefit at the expense of the employer. At the same time, the driving force behind the actual employer is to squeeze every ounce of effort out of the employees for as little as possible remuneration. Okay, and more importantly, the overall objective of the business itself is to maximize their profits, typically competing in the marketplace with a view to putting their opposition out of business. The opposition, incidentally, is their fellow Aussies, and we are deliberately trying to put them out of business, very often bankrupting them or subject them to other financial and social distress situations. And all of this is so that we can accumulate or hoard our assets for ourselves in retirement. This is always achieved at the expense of others, ladies and gentlemen. That is its inherent nature. And that is just the basics. What I've listed above you is for you is just the basics. Before any corruption sets in, or political tyranny, or racism, or tribalism, or sectarianism, or sexism, or any other ism sets in and compounds the problem. This cannot work. It is obvious that it cannot work, and it never has worked in the past, and it never will in the future. If we continue to strive to put each other out of business, if we continue to create poor people, starving people, desperate people, every time we do a deal or do a transaction or pass a law, the financial and social distress accumulates to breaking point, and people become so desperate that they rise up and society is plunged into anarchy and revolution. This has happened time and time again throughout history, and other than force majeure, there are no exceptions. You have a look and see that you won't find any exceptions. The good news, ladies and gents, is that there is a way, there is a better way, and there's a way that works perfectly. The leaders of ASPM movement have tried and tested the Better Way for 14 years now, and we've built businesses that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars by trading in a better way and acting in a better way and operating out of a different culture. So we must get rid of this failed culture, and we must replace it with a culture of caring and sharing, because that is what leads to universal prosperity. I know this sounds counterintuitive, but if we ensure that every party to every deal prospers, and that includes all of our social interactions as well, then we will create people of means who can trade with us again, who can trade with each other again, and who can trade again and again and again. If everyone does this, then the whole community prospers, and we steadily eliminate systemic poverty and the social distress that I've listed above. As I said, we've been doing this for 14 years, and we've built businesses worth hundreds of millions. We've hugely prospered our clients. We've hugely prospered our business counterparties, whom you might regard as your opposition. And by default, we've prospered our communities based on this very culture. It's important to know that we don't do this because it feels good and because it appeals to our conscience. We simply do it because it works and because it is sustainable. And in fact, it is the only way a society, a nation, or an economy can possibly be sustainable in the long term. Think about it. If your goal is to put your fellow Aussies out of business, you're going to have to pay for their welfare. Wouldn't it be better if they were successful so that there is no welfare bill? So please take time to read through some of the case studies on this website, and that'll give you an understanding of how well this works in a practical sense. We'll be building on those case studies. We've got lots of them to add. Dealing with the symptoms. Of course, it's imperative that we must deal with the symptoms of this failed culture. And yes, of course, we must build orphanages, women's shelters, rehab clinics, food and medical aid, and so on and so on. But simply by dealing with the symptoms and not dealing with the root cause of the problem is tantamount to mopping up the water without switching off the tap. More and more taps are turned on, more and more water flows. We mop up more and more frantically. Ultimately, we are overwhelmed and we drown. We must address the cultural issue, and if we do address this cultural issue, public policy will follow. Public policy will have no effect if we don't change culture first. So I'm going to give you a short example of what I'm talking about, and you'll see where a root cause has a distinction from a symptom. Let's look at the homelessness for women in Australia. The single largest cause of homelessness for women in all Australian states is domestic violence. And the single largest cause for domestic violence is financial hardship. And of course, the root cause for most of the financial hardship is this culture of greed and self-centeredness that we've been working under for so long, and we've been trading under and doing our transactions under. So it stands to reason then that if we deal with this economic culture of the nation and its people, we will reduce financial hardship. And if we significantly reduce financial hardship, we will reduce domestic violence. And in turn, we will reduce homelessness in women. This will also reduce the physical and the financial trauma of the homeless women, and it will reduce the negative emotional and financial fallout from family breakdown, including the welfare expense to the rest of the community. Important to note that not all social distress is the result of economic issues, but it is just about always the result of maximizing self-interest over others. For example, the sex trafficking of little girls. This begs a question: is why was somebody so desperate that they sold their beloved little girl into sex slavery? And in the vast majority of cases, we know that this is because of extreme poverty. Therefore, if we deal with the root cause of the poverty, we should solve the problem, right? Wrong. You see, there's another problem, the problem of supply and demand. Why is it, this begs the second question, why is it that there is a demand for sex with 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old little girls? So this is not an economic problem, but a moral issue or a psychological issue, this business of having power and lust over a helpless child. And this is best dealt with by experts in the moral or in the psychological instructions, such as psychologists, churches, and other organizations. And yes, I know churches have also been infiltrated by bad culture, as have all sectors of our community, and we need to deal with that as well. There's no getting away from any of that. But look, here's what we propose as a solution. We've embarked on building the largest body of singularly minded business owners that Australia has ever seen, at least 150,000 on a single database or network. Now, we would love to have non-business owners, employees, mums and dads as well. If we could have everybody in Australia, then what a pleasure. You're all very, very welcome. But we need the business owners on board because it is they who are the most influential in the marketplace, and it is they who have the ability to change culture quite quickly in the marketplace. So ASP is an organization where everyone is on the same page, all focused on building what we call a just nation. And the just nation is driven by a preferred economy. You can read the website and see what the interpretation of these are. This movement, we've named it the ASP movement, and obviously ASP is an acronym for All Shall Prosper, in line with the broader vision. So the objective is to use this huge network to form a collective voice and to undertake collective action, and that action to eliminate the causes of and the symptoms of this incredible social distress caused by the failed culture. What we propose has never been done before, because we've got to keep in mind that we're forming a movement which will establish a counterculture to thousands of years of greed and corruption. So it's a big job, but it is entirely doable, and it is especially doable by the business people. This new culture has to start with us, the business people. We are the engine room of this nation. The nearly 2.4 million SMEs, which represent 10% of our entire population of Australia, we are the ones who must do this. Since we are the creators of enterprise, since we are the higher achievers, and therefore it is our obligation to instigate this as a way of life. It is entirely doable, ladies and gentlemen. We are already doing it, and we are already prospering in the process. Okay, so how will ASP achieve this? Firstly, by demonstrating and proving to the public that the model actually works. Secondly, by teaching it to others, showing them how to do it, teaching them, giving them education on how to do it. Thirdly, creating much, much more enterprise nationally than we already have in Australia. We must understand that we will never tax ourselves into prosperity. We must create ethical, clean enterprise to be sustainable in the long term. And then fourthly, by gathering ideas from which to form initiatives. To achieve this fourth criteria, we will canvass our members for ideas. We want your ideas, ladies and gents, from all walks of life, man or woman, Indigenous or mainstream, of faith or of not of faith. We want the ideas of 150,000 business leaders filtering in. We will take these ideas, or the best of these ideas, and we will create think tanks and discussion groups specialized in various sectors of the market and of society. And then once we've thrashed them out with these groups, we will develop these into initiatives, and then we will implement the initiatives. We will have petitions to influence government, media, education, church, enterprise, the lot. We'll have high-level delegations to go and have meetings with all of the above, and as often as possible and wherever possible, we will get on with these initiatives ourselves, as opposed to requiring government. Probably just need permissions and permits and so on. But we don't. If we can do it, if enterprise and business can do it, what a pleasure! Much quicker. In terms of enterprise. One of the major visions of the ASP movement is promoting the greening of our continent. Okay, we must make this entire continent livable by bringing water to the interior. We do not have a choice in this matter. We must understand this large-scale infrastructure, we must undertake this large-scale infrastructure if we are to prosper as a nation. Making the interior an attractive place to live, to do business, with tax incentives and other social and economic incentives will be high on the agenda. Promoting immigration of like-minded people to populate the continent. You know, you might not have thought of this, but we need at least double the current population in Australia. We're not talking about crashing our borders and so on. We're talking about structured immigration to achieve a specific society of caring, sharing people whose objective is to create universal prosperity. With 24 million people, we hardly even have a domestic market, which is why our car manufacturers and our other manufacturing industries are closing down and moving offshore. We can't even defend the place without relying on others who themselves are only reliable when it suits their self-interests. Okay, important to understand that. So propagating the new culture around the world is going to be a high objective of ours. We are already doing that by lecturing all over the world. Our lectures are in demand in most continents around the world. So As I've said, our objective, the objective of ASPM, is actually to have a collective voice and to be able to take collective action in order to implement change. So that's our objective. But in return for joining, we want to reward people for joining. It's always free. There's no charge for anything here, but we want you to have benefits for joining us. The benefits will be learning how to multiply your businesses. We've grown businesses from nothing to 100 million in less than 3 years, okay? We'll show you how to do that. Learning what works and what does not work in the marketplace. Learning how to prosper others, very, very important. Business opportunities. You know, the leaders of the ASPM movement are significant business owners. We get many, many opportunities that we can't even engage in. We're too busy to do them. We will pass these down to the membership base and you'll be able to get on with those if they suit you, okay? Promoting your businesses at networking events, airing your ideas and having your ideas promoted and being part of that and being part of something which is changing culture for the benefit of your children and your children's children. Those are the benefits to the members. Generally, most members do not even need to do much, just overtly belong to the group, understand the concept when asked, and trade the ASP way and rally to the cause when needed. That's what we're asking in return for what we're giving you. It is important to know what we are not, okay, because we can be accused of all manner of things, but we are not a political party, we're not politically aligned, we are not a church, we're not the church, and we're not denominationally aligned. We're not some far-right group, we're not a group of bigots, we welcome ideas from all walks of life and all peoples. We're not racist, we're not sexist, we're not homophobic, and we're not Islamophobic. So we're none of those phobics, all right? But what we are a like-minded network of mostly small to medium enterprise owners who are focused on creating universal prosperity through the changing of culture and providing solutions to our social distress. We're an organization who value our posterity much more than we value our assets and our balance sheets. In other words, we're creating a society that our children can prosper in, not one of anarchy, which is where we're heading at the moment. We're creating universal prosperity through growth and ethical enterprise, as I've mentioned. We're about phasing out corruption. We're about reducing red tape wherever possible. We're about reducing regressive taxation. We're about phasing out self-serving bureaucracy and replacing it with efficient, vision-focused professional administrations. We're about promoting leaders with sustainable national vision. We're about phasing in politicians or political leaders who are able to strategize policy beyond the next election, which is quite rare. I don't want to be derogatory to our pollies because we love them, we work with them, we're very engaged in public policy, but it is a problem. We're also about phasing in political leaders who are focused on the national interests and not necessarily on the self-serving interests of their own political parties. And at the end of the day, we're setting up a benchmark economy and a society in a modern developed nation for other nations to follow and to copy. Australia is a very important nation on the world stage, but it only has a very small population. This makes it very much easier to reach a tipping point for change. And after 10 years of teaching this, there is massive momentum around the country now in the marketplace, amongst the business people and the business leaders, and this indicates that Australia will be the first nation in the world to be a just nation, which others can follow in the future. Okay, so now that you've heard what ASP is all about, and if you agree with what ASP is all about, and if you agree with what you've heard, please tick the box that confirms you understand, and then please sign up and join the movement. We would love to have you on board. As I said, everything is free, and you're just very welcome to join and become part of the largest and most influential coalition of business owners, business networks, marketplace ministries, and ethical people this nation has ever seen. Ladies and gents, let's use our collective voice to change culture for the good of all Australians and then pass it on to the rest of the world. Thanks very much for joining us and welcome aboard. God bless.